The devil looms large in the collective imagination, but where did he come from and why? When it comes to Satan, there are some lingering mysteries, despite the hundreds or even thousands of years we've had to solve them. In many Christian traditions, the devil is no less than the personification of evil, but where exactly did he come from? The Bible doesn't contain many clues, if any. Isaiah 14:12-17 refers to a Lucifer who attempted to gain prominence over God and was cast out of heaven and thrown into hell as a result.
Return as my ally and devoted angel of the kingdom.
Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven.
But is this Satan? Nothing in the text strictly says so, though some say Lucifer and Satan are one and the same. That was certainly the inspiration behind John Milton's 17th century epic poem Paradise Lost, in which Lucifer becomes a darkly compelling anti-hero who looms large over our modern perception of the devil. But there's evidence that at least one version of Satan was actually an associate of God. In the book of Job, a figure referred to in the Hebrew text as Ha-Satan acts as an adversary who comes across as more of a functionary in God's domain, as opposed to the traditional Satan we all know. This devil-god dichotomy may have at least some roots in earlier religious traditions. Zoroastrianism had their creator deity facing off against the chaotic devil-like character named Ahriman. While there are plenty of stories about the devil roaming the earth and tempting mere mortals, many also have him go back to a home base of sorts. Hell.
Through me, the way into the suffering city. Through me, the way to the eternal pain.
But does he really go there or even rule over it as the story goes? Not necessarily. There are biblical hints that he's been banished there, assuming you accept the proposal that the devil and figures like Lucifer are one and the same. But being imprisoned in a place is hardly evidence that you've got control over that same spot. For that notion, we have to thank both John Milton and medieval poet Dante Alighieri.
Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, is that it?
In fact, Satan's whole thing in Milton's work is that he wants to rule over something, and though hell is a pale comparison to the glories of Milton's heaven, it's better than nothing at all. As for Dante, the Divine Comedy explicitly states that the devil has power over the elaborate hellscape Dante traverses in the first section, known as the Inferno.
In the dark and turbid air, they could just make out the dismal forms of a vast multitude of anguished souls circling endlessly.
Dante's devil is a gigantic demon, half frozen in ice, weeping while he chews on the bodies of betrayers. Despite his looming presence, it's hard to believe he's really in charge here. From a religious perspective, the devil's position in hell remains pretty obscure. Many writers and artists have imagined the appearance of the devil, but is he a beautiful angel plummeting to earth, a grotesque demon in a dark pit, a punky rebel? We have no clue what the devil is really supposed to look like, at least not if we're going off the Christian Bible.
Devil.
Guilty.
Some early descriptions even put the devil in close visual quarters with angels. A 6th century Byzantine mosaic in a basilica in Ravenna, Italy appears to have the earliest known depiction of Lucifer. Yet instead of glowering from hell, this Satan sits to the left of Jesus, depicted in a serene blue while standing before a trio of goats. It's a reference to Matthew 25:31-46, in which Jesus is predicted to separate the believers, sheep, from the unbelievers, goats, sending the goats off to eternal punishment. But this devil is almost identical to the red-clad angel watching over the sheep. So how did we get to the horned, hairy, goat-hoofed version of the devil? It could be that medieval artists who depicted the devil as an animalistic demon drew inspiration from pagan gods like the ancient Greeks' half-goat Pan, in conjunction with the association between Satan and goats established in Matthew. Asking whether the devil is evil might seem like a silly question, but the early history of the Christian devil does introduce some complicated questions in that arena. Consider that 6th century Italian mosaic in which he's depicted as a blue-tinged angel sitting next to Jesus and seemingly doing the will of the divine. Some stories depicting the devil introduce the idea that perhaps evil isn't always his game.
In spite of all his imperfections, I'm a fan of man! I'm a humanist.
For example, Satan appears in Job 1:6-22 as a kind of prosecuting attorney in direct communication with God. When God speaks glowingly of Job, Satan asks, "Doth Job fear God for naught?" Perhaps if God stops giving Job such an easy life, the man's faith will wither. And indeed, God gives Satan the power to mess up Job's life, imparting a powerful lesson about the unknowable nature of God and divine will.
What's that like? One day you're putting them away, next day you're setting them free.
Likewise, mystical Sufi traditions within Islam have sometimes held up Iblis, essentially the Muslim version of Satan, as a righteous rebel who refuses to bow before Adam and only wishes to worship Allah. In retellings of Genesis, the devil is the serpent who tempts Eve into eating forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden, saying, God doth know that in the day you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil.
This is not a straight shooter. This is not somebody who's going to tell the truth. His job is to tempt you.
But the true identity of that serpent is never made clear. Sure, it would make narrative sense for a key figure in the downfall of humanity to be the devil, but the Bible never gets around to specifying that it's Satan in snake form who infiltrated Eden. In fact, the Hebrew scriptures that make up the Old Testament never strictly define a singular devil figure at all. The Satan referred to in Job may just be a challenging angel working with God.
Satan, hi.
Hey, Pete. What's up, man?
So what brings you guys up here?
Relax, dude. We're invited.
It was only during the period between when the Old Testament texts were written and when the Greek books of the New Testament began to be written that Jewish theologians began to propose the idea of a primary adversary known as the devil.
The most intriguing character, as we all know from our reading, was Satan.
Even then, the serpent seems to have remained a serpent. Nothing or no one in the New Testament tried to connect the creature with the figure of the devil, though snakes definitely had a demonic reputation for writers like the author of Revelation. It gets complicated when you start to consider what to call some of the biggest figures in the Bible. Take God, for instance, whose name is considered so sacred by some Jews and Christians that they instead use an abbreviated form or any one of many titles to show their respect. For a variety of reasons throughout history, God has been known as Elohim, Yahweh, Adonai, and Kyrios, just to name a few. Things are even more mysterious when it comes to naming the devil. Are Beelzebub, Mephistopheles, Moloch, and Baphomet all names for one being, or are all these individual demons, for lack of a better term? Ultimately, the Bible leaves us with more questions than answers about the devil's name, and looking into extra-biblical sources like folklore or Rolling Stone songs hardly clears things up. Instead, we're left with a lingering mystery as to what to call the devil. If we assume the devil is the embodiment of evil in a world run by a good and just God, it quickly presents a thorny issue. It could be that God is totally in control and yet still allows horrible things to exist. Or if not that, then those awful situations run rampant because divine power isn't quite as strong as we may hope it to be. A third possibility, of course, is that perhaps God isn't all that just and good to begin with. That's the basis for the philosophical and religious quandary popularly known as the problem of evil.
Let me give you a little inside information about God. God likes to watch. He's a prankster.
To many, that's an overly simplistic view of evil and the devil. Some go the theodicy route, claiming that evil, and by extension the power we grant to the devil, is a consequence of our troublesome free will and resulting ability to sin, though perhaps it still doesn't satisfy the follow-up question as to why God allows sin in his system in the first place. Others may say that God's design is beyond human comprehension, perhaps meaning that even the devil doesn't totally understand why he's allowed to continue doing his evil thing, or basically, nobody knows anything. While the devil has a place in Christianity, it's not the only Abrahamic religion in which he appears and generates uncomfortable ideas. In Judaism, Satan is a being who appears from time to time. After all, the Bible's Old Testament is part of the canon, although some of the details differ. However, in most Jewish theological discussions, he's more representative of the wayward path in humanity's temptation than one evil figure.
That's the devil in disguise.
The devil is more of an individual in Muslim accounts where he raises some disconcerting questions that aren't always answered. In the Quran 17:61-65, as well as in other spots throughout the scriptures, an angel named Iblis refuses to bow before the human Adam, even when commanded by Allah. Iblis is banished, but not before he promises to tempt humanity, with God's permission. In other parts of the text, humans like Adam and Eve are tempted by Shaitan, spirits that follow Iblis. However, Islamic mystics like the Sufis have wondered if maybe Iblis wasn't so off base. As some medieval thinkers argued, Iblis was only showing his true unadulterated devotion to Allah by refusing to effectively worship another. But was this a legitimate interpretation or part of the Sufi trend toward heresy and public humiliation in order to humble themselves and reach a higher sense of spirituality? That's hard to tell, but it introduces the rather chilling and perplexing argument that the devil may have been onto something. Of course, the devil will have something to do with the end of the world, but what exactly is his role in the apocalypse? That's more mysterious, even to close readers of the Bible and other religious texts.
I'm the devil, remember? I'm evil!
Most interpretations of the apocalyptic book of Revelation maintain that the Antichrist, said to emerge in the end times, will act in the devil's stead on earth. Be darn bad, considering that the Antichrist is predicted to take control of the world.
Your soul is mine.
But as the book of Revelation claims, Satan himself isn't strictly on the ground when the apocalypse gets rolling. Revelation 20:1-5 does maintain that Satan is chained up in the abyss for much of the end times, but after 1,000 years of a returned Christ ruling over the earth, Satan is to be set free to do his evil thing in the final battle between his forces and those of God. However, the specifics of what he's supposed to do, how he's supposed to do it, who exactly his agents are to be, and how they'll operate are hard to parse. And again, Revelation could just be an allegory, or maybe that's exactly what the devil wants us to think.